Hello, this is James Himm Mitchell, and I'm back again with another weekly Lenormand and Tarot Tag-Team video. I want to say thank you to all the viewers and subscribers who continue to send me wonderful words of encouragement and support for these videos, and to continue to do more of them, so I'd like to honor the request. So I want to say thank you for that right off the bat, right out the gate. And for this week's video, I'm going to be going with a particular theme, and this is why. This week, I'm based in South Carolina, and this weekend we have experienced, as a result of Joaquin, a lot of rain and flooding, and so there are some areas in my state that are have been really impacted and really devastated with all the flooding. I was watching the news last night, and I saw homes underwater, people having to be evacuated and rescued by boat and kayak from their homes. I even saw one with a woman and a baby being raised up by a helicopter, things of that nature. And, you know, hearing that people have lost their homes, lost everything in their homes. And, you know, my heart goes out to these people in this time. I'm very fortunate that I suffered no damage to my house in any shape, form, or fashion, so I'm very grateful for that. But I was thinking this morning in terms of like, what deck did I want to use for this reading, and then I remembered something that Doreen Virtue, who is known for her work with, you know, the angels and the fairies, she said this about fairies, and I remembered it in this moment, is that fairies are elementals that are very close to the earth and very close to nature. And so keeping in mind with what's been going on with Mother Nature over the course of these last few days, I'm using a deck that I don't get to use very often, which is the Fairy Lenormand Oracle cards. It's by Marcus Katz, Tali Goodwin, and Davide Corsi. And so I'm using that for this portion, and in part two, for the tarot portion, I'm going to be using the Mystical Fairy Tarot. Again, a deck that's been in my collection for quite some time, and I don't really use it. So this gives me a chance to use a Lenormand deck and a tarot deck that complement each other in the same way. So having said that, I'm going to be doing a line of 3 for this week's video, and this is why. Because these cards, while they are gorgeous, they are also very large. And so it would be challenging for me to get 5 cards in a line all the way across. So I'm going to be using 3 cards. These cards are the typical oracle card size. So if you work with Doreen Virtue's decks, for instance, since I mentioned her, these are actually the size of her decks, which goes way beyond the size of a typical Lenormand deck, which is usually either in a bridge size or poker size, like the typical size of playing cards. Ooh, I dropped that one. So having said that, so the reading this week is going to consist of 3 cards, and then the tarot reading will also be corresponding to those 3 cards based on the inserts that show up. So having said that, I am now going to shuffle, cut, and deal the cards. So stay tuned, and I will be right back. And we're back. The cards have been shuffled, cut, and dealt. And we're going to be doing a line of 3 for the weekly reading. And I'm going to start things off with the central card. The central card for me is always the focus or the issue that is being addressed that we need to be aware of for the week. So this card is the Rider. And so the Rider is a card that represents news and messages. So that could be the central focus of the week. It could also be about an arrival or a visitor. So for some of us, we may be having someone coming to visit or stay with us, or that we may be visiting someone else this week. So those are the 2 things that I'm noticing with this card right off the bat. So what we do for more information about that is we look to the cards that are flanking the central card. So starting with the left card, for more information, we have the Birds. So now the Birds is a card of communication and conversation for me. there are different cards in the deck that talk about communication. This particular one talks about verbal communication, something that is spoken, something oral. So I'm seeing this as with the pair, because Lenormand is best read in pairs and triplets. So the pair of the birds and the rider could be a message that's communicated orally. So the birds can also represent something like a phone call. So I'm seeing the pair as, voicemail. So if you're not actually engaged in a conversation with the person over the phone, then this might suggest that we are going to be receiving some voicemail of some kind that may require some attention. So I'm seeing that as an immediate thing that just jumps out at me right off the bat. The other thing that I'm seeing, and this is how these general readings, we have to take them and make them applicable to us, since a general reading, is going out to lots of people who find their way to it. There's not going to be every aspect of the reading that's going to fit every single person. So for me, I'm looking at this, and this is just for me personally, the birds can sometimes represent siblings, and going with the idea of news or messages with the writer, and the idea of, somebody arriving or some sort of visitor, then this pair for me, I have a sibling, I have a brother, and we talked last week, and he would like for us to get together this week that we're in right now, because he says he has something he'd like to share with me. So I'm seeing that for me, it could actually be like this is the week that my brother and I actually get together. So this is just a way of kind of seeing how the messages of the card, because the cards have so many meanings and the combinations can reveal so many different things. It's like, how can you hear what's being said and apply it to your life as it currently is? So for me, it might not be that I get the voicemail, but I'm definitely going to see my brother this week. So that's just an example. So I'm seeing this is either some conversation, some messages being delivered. If it's not an actual phone call with the birds, and it might be somebody leaves a voicemail that you have to respond to. Okay, so now on the right side of this card, we have the key. Okay, so now the key is a card for me that represents something important, some sort of answer or solution. It can represent something that's being revealed or discovered. The act of the fairy here with the key in her hands is that she's in the process of unlocking something. So it could be that something's being unlocked, or that, going with the image, she could have just taken the key out of the lock. So it could be something that's being locked. So again, for me, my most go-to with the key is about something of an answer, something of a solution, something that's going to be discovered or revealed. So having said that, if we look at the pair of the rider and the key, it could be read as important news or message. It could be that a visitor brings a key or brings something key. It could be a revealing message. It could be news about a discovery of some kind. It could be discovering a message or discovering some kind of news. And then going with the idea that the birds and the rider could represent a phone call and somebody having to leave a voicemail. One or two things could happen. Either we answer the phone call when it comes in, going with the key and the birds, or that we answer the message once we receive it, going with the key and the rider. So now, having said that, our last pair would be the birds and the key, and so that could be an important conversation. It could be that communication this week is key, especially with this week still being Mercury retrograde. This is the last week, I believe. I think Mercury goes out of retrograde supposedly on October the 9th. So this is actually probably the last week. I think the 9th is on Friday. So we still have to be mindful of the way that we communicate this week, because communication is key. We want to make sure that our communications are clear, that the person on the receiving end of the message understands exactly what we meant and how we meant it, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that communication is still clear because it's still key this week. It could also be a revealing conversation. So like I said, that for me, the idea of me going to see my brother because he has something he wants to say to me, it could be very important. You know, and of course I won't know until I'm there and I'm in the moment. But this set is letting me know that the potential for the news to be important is there. And then also too, you know, that we have a conversation or some sort of communication that leads to a breakthrough. So I'm seeing that with all the cards. So now we could do the hidden dynamics. I normally do it with a row of 5, but we still can do it with a row of 3. So going with the center card here being news or communication, then what we could do is look to the card on the left, and this is where we go with the playing cards of the deck now. And so I'm seeing we have the 7 of diamonds on the left. So the 7th card in the deck is the snake. And so now the snake is a card that usually, again, can be a little bit of a challenge, but it depends on the reader. I know there are a number of readers who see the snake as something that's healing and transformative. I tend to see the snake as my chief meaning for the snake is something of a complication. So it could be that the message that we're talking about is some sort of complication or a complicated thing, or that it's complex because the snake also represents something complex. The other thing about the snake for me, it represents a long and winding process, and that's because the snake is a reptile that coils. So usually represents something that's not like a straight line. It kind of twists and turns and things of that nature. So it could be the message is long and involved, or that the message is something that's problematic, or something that just goes on and on. You know, the long and winding process part, like the person who's telling it, it's just going on and on and on. So also too, we have to be mindful of the traditional meaning of the snake in some regards, because it can represent something that may not entirely be the truth, because sometimes this card is about being told a lie. So it could be about being lied to. So be mindful of considering the source that the information is coming from, and if the person can be trusted as a source or trustworthy with the information. And going in light of that, then the birds is a card that can sometimes represent gossip, rumor, and speculation. So that's one side of that. The other side here, with the key, we have the inset of the 8 of diamonds. And so the 8th card in the deck is the coffin. And so now the coffin is a card that represents something coming to an end. It could represent limitation and restriction and confinement. So I'm seeing this as it could be a situation in which something is coming to an end. The communication is about completing something being closed. Sometimes I see the coffin as closure. So it could be something that we talk about that brings a closure of some kind. Something to, like when we're talking about things, and this is important in light of, you know, the idea of the snake and the birds maybe dealing with an issue that's long and winding or complicated. Sometimes the best way to remove the complication would be just to kind of limit it or restrict the conversation to the topic at hand. You know, sometimes people get tangential and they get off topic. And so, you know, if you're going to set up a conversation that's important, that's going to bring about some sort of closure to an issue or put an issue to rest or to bed once and for all, then it might suggest that, you know, making sure that both parties involved in the conversation, because the birds can represent 2, meaning 2 people. So both sides in the conversation, they make the agreement that we're not going to stray off the topic. And so limit it and restrict it to the topic at hand. You know, it's like, I'm seeing it in terms of, and I'm not saying this is the case, but sometimes, you know, when we engage in an argument with somebody, sometimes the way the topic gets offhand or off topic is that we bring up an issue that has nothing to do with what it is that the fight is about in the moment. Like somebody will bring up something that may have happened months ago, and that doesn't help. So, you know, I'm seeing the coffin as maybe how can we limit or restrict that conversation to the topic at hand. So now, looking at the pair of the snake and the coffin, it could be read as ending a complication or ending a problem. So I'm seeing that too in that. So I also want to point out with the playing cards that the thing that struck me is that 2 of the 3 cards are from the suit of diamonds. And so for me, diamonds represent prosperity, abundance, and well-being. So that may be some of the energy, or part of the topic of the conversation is about somebody's financial status, somebody's prosperity, somebody's sense of well-being. And that could make sense in terms of the coffin, because sometimes the coffin can represent illness or a need for rest. So going with the well-being aspect, it could be like, what do we need to do to take better care of ourselves from a well-being standpoint? And one of the things that the coffin could suggest would be getting some rest. You know, the other thing with the snake in that regard, it could be like, you know, some sort of complication, and the complication is coming to an end. So if there is a wellness issue or a topic that's about well-being, it could be like, if it's been a complicated process, it's about bringing that to an end. So I'm seeing that. I always look for patterns to show up. So the other thing that we can do with the playing cards is that we can take the pips and we can add them all the way across. So we have a 7, we have the 9 of hearts with the rider, so that's a 9, and then we have the 8 of diamonds with the key, and so that gives us a total of 24. And so the 24th card in the deck is the heart. Here we go. And so the heart is a card that represents passion. So we may have a conversation about what it is that we're passionate about. The heart for me is also about enthusiasm. So it could be about a conversation in which we're enthusiastic to discuss, you know, discuss or clear the air. Now, the card is also about love and romance and our feelings. So it could be that, you know, the topic could be about love. The topic could be about romance. The topic could be about, you know, something of a feeling or emotional nature. And so I'm seeing that. So because this card for me, again, is about feelings of the heart. So now, keeping in mind, some of us who are watching this video might not be in a relationship or a romance or in love. Like, for instance, right now, I'm not. So that part wouldn't apply to me. But it could be something that I'm passionate about, because I'm always talking about passion. So, and passion doesn't necessarily just represent being passionate about a person. It could be being passionate about one's work. It could be being passionate about a new idea. It could be passion about a new interest, things of that nature. So the question could be like, what are we passionate about? And if we're talking about our passion, how can we talk about it in a way that kind of engages the people that we're talking to? For instance, now, in light of these videos, for me, the heart would represent people who are fans or who are enthusiastic about the topic that I'm passionate about, which is actually, in the moment right now, doing these Lenormand card readings. So it would be like people loving what I do because I love it, and I'm talking from a place that my passion about it is kind of contagious. So things are like that. So that's one way of looking at the heart. So that's that. The last thing we can do is to take the numbers of all the cards, because I say this all the time. The Lenormand card has 3 facets. It has the central image, it has the playing card aspect, and then it also has a number that it's assigned. And so I take the numbers and add them up, and this kind of creates an essence of what the meaning is all about. So we have 12, we have 1, and we have 33. And so that brings us to 46. And so then my rule of thumb when I'm doing this is that since the Lenormand card deck has 36 cards in it, anything over 36, I take the numbers and I reduce it. So I take 4 and the 6 and add it to 10. And the 10th card in the deck is the scythe. And it's right here. So this card always represents, for me, something sudden. So it could be that the news that we get comes to us suddenly or quickly because it represents something sudden, fast, quick, or swift. It could also represent, in terms of communication, I'm seeing this. Since Mercury is still in retrograde, this could be a challenge because this card could be representative of communication that's short, concise, to the point. It could also be the possibility of a message that's kind of blunt in how it comes across and how it might be received. So again, this is the week of being mindful of how we're communicating and making sure that, yes, we can get our point across, but how do we get it across in a way that allows the other person to receive it in the spirit and the intention that it's meant to be received. And if we're having communication verbally, going with the birds, with someone, being mindful of not cutting the other person off while they're talking, because I sometimes see this as something being cut off. So being mindful of, again, getting to the point of the conversation, and that would match with the coffin about limiting and restricting something to the topic at hand. Also, not being blunt in a way that leaves a person feeling hurt, because sometimes this card is about pain. So not hurting somebody with our words like that. And also to how can we honor a person in the communication process by not cutting them off. So I'm seeing that. This will bring our Lenormand aspect of this Lenormand and Tag Team reading to a close. So again, summing up, the birds represents communication and conversation. It represents something oral. So be mindful of the words that we're choosing to use this week. The rider is all about news and messages being delivered. So I'm seeing this as maybe a phone call or voicemail. And then the key at the end is something that's important, something that may lead to a discovery, a breakthrough, or something that reveals something. So these are the cards. This has been, like I said, the Lenormand part of the Lenormand and Tarot Tag Team. And in the next part, we will get to what does Tarot have to say about all of this. So stay tuned.